As the debate over immigration reform continues, a handful of migrants have been allowed into the Otay port. The challenges in their quest for asylum. And a look at the federal operation removing immigrants. How much money is spent on these deportation flights?
We can no longer trust the management of Southern California Edison to load these canisters into the silos, and we cannot trust them to manage the waste. And unfortunately, that means that we're going to have to go back to court.
Coming soon, a legal challenge over nuclear waste from San Onofre, the key change that could make relocation impossible.
They're asking people to stay off the beach. Why don't you want to come down?
I think that's quite unreasonable. As long as you use your judgment, don't get in the water.
Braving monster waves and the safety measures for thrill seekers. KPBS Evening Edition starts right now. Good evening and thanks for joining us. I'm Ebony Monet. 20 asylum seekers were allowed into the Otay Mesa port of entry. They were escorted by 2 members of Congress who waited with the group for hours. KPBS border reporter Jean Guerrero has the story from Tijuana.
The escorted group was made up of Hondurans from the migrant exodus that advocates had deemed high risk. Congressman Jimmy Gomez and Congresswoman Nanette Berrigan, Democrats from Los Angeles, hoped that these individuals could bypass a weeks-long wait list for asylum if they were escorted by advocates. But when they arrived at the port, Customs and Border Protection officials stopped them. They told the group that the agency didn't have the resources to process the individuals at this time.
We're led to believe that they have a capacity issue. That's what we were led to believe, which is why I said, well, let the 2 members go in and just see the capacity issue. And they haven't let us in.
The group included 8 unaccompanied minors, 1 man, and a mom and her 5 children. Another family of 5 later joined. Attorney Nicole Ramos of the migrant advocacy group Al Otro Lado says the agency's practice of turning people away, even temporarily, puts people's lives in danger.
CBP officers have been turning away asylum seekers for years. I've accompanied hundreds of refugees to the ports of entry.
Advocates from Families Belong Together helped organize the walk up to the port of entry. By Tuesday morning, all 20 individuals had been allowed into the port. Jean Guerrero, KPBS News.
The Trump administration says it might not rely on Congress for money to build the new border wall. While talking with reporters today, Press Secretary Sarah Sanders said the president might redirect money approved for the other government agencies. There was also this exchange when she suggested the money might come from the new trade agreement with Mexico.
With the deficit ballooning to over $1 trillion under this president, where are the additional monies for this wall going to come from, and why is he asking the American taxpayer for them when he promised Mexico was going to pay?
Look, we're not asking American taxpayers for that. We are looking at existing funding through other agencies right now that we can draw on to do that in immediately.
So
the president's been clear. The president has been clear that the USMCA deal would provide additional revenue through that deal that would show that Mexico is paying for the wall.
The Treasury, though, the trade benefits, if there are any, don't go to the Treasury.
He's saying that the revenue provided and the money that would be saved through the USMCA deal, we can pay for the wall 4 times over, and by doing that new trade deal, we have the opportunity to pay for the wall.
But trade benefits go to private citizens. They don't go to the United States Treasury.
He's talking about the general revenue that comes from that.
So you're going to tax?
No, we're not taxing. We're talking about additional revenue that wouldn't have existed without the president getting a new deal.
Have you done the math on that?
There have been a number of things that we've looked at in which we know will have additional revenue that comes in through the USMCA.
From the USMCA into the Treasury?
We think there will be more than that comes in.
The Trump administration says it wants to spend more money deporting immigrants. Associated Press reporter John Moan was given access to one of the private deportation flights known as ICE Air.
Their belongings on the tarmac lying aside manacles and chains. A long line of shackled men and women scooted off a private detention center contractor's bus, up a mobile staircase, and shuffled onto a private jetliner the size of a Boeing 737. A team of immigration and customs enforcement officers and prison contractors then patted them down and checked their mouths for anything hidden. This is a deportation flight run by ICE Air, the destination El Salvador. An obscure division of ICE operates hundreds of these flights each year to remove immigrants. Deportation flights are big business. The U.S. government has spent about $1 billion on them in the last decade, and now the Trump administration wants to increase the budget for ICE Air by 30%. About 100,000 people per year are deported on these flights. Migrant advocacy and legal experts say there's one big winner in tougher immigration enforcement, from detention to tracking and deportation.
These are vast sums of money that are being spent to repatriate these people.
It's private companies.
You know, the question becomes, are there other ways that this vast amount of money can be spent? I mean, could it be spent to prioritize the deportations, to have a more efficient procedure?
ICE transports detained immigrants between American cities and for those with removal orders back to their home countries. The agency gave the Associated Press access to film the boarding of this flight in November on the condition we not show deportees' faces. While the agency did not agree to an on-camera interview, an official from ICE's Houston field office says they aim to be efficient in sending detainees to their home countries, adding, "If a judge says you need to be removed, we should be expeditiously working to execute that order so that person does not spend any longer in detention than necessary." The AP was not allowed to film on board the jet. ICE officials say a meal is served and a doctor is on board. All detainees, even those considered non-criminal, remain shackled until the plane lands. John Moan, Associated Press, Houston.
A new federal report shows San Diego has the fourth highest homeless population in the nation. San Diego has more than 8,500 homeless residents. At least 5,000 people are either living on the street, in a vehicle, or some type of tent. The city is considering a ballot measure to raise money for affordable housing in 2020. In contrast, the state's homeless population fell by more than 1% in the past year. Escondido's new mayor has his first city council meeting tomorrow. KPBS reporter Matt Hoffman had a chance to speak with Paul McNamara about his new role. His first question was about the former mayor and his opposition to the sanctuary state law.
He had a hard stance on immigration. He went to the White House, met with President Trump about his opposition to SB 54. Do you agree with Abed there, or where do you stand in terms of California's dubbed sanctuary state law?
Well, I think clearly he made that an issue through the campaign. I tried to keep the issues that we were concerned about that were within the scope and responsibilities of the mayor. And as we all know, immigration is a federal responsibility. And the people you need to really be talking about that if you want change are those representatives that go to Washington, or if you're concerned about the state's sanctuary city stance, you need to be talking to the people of that go to Sacramento. And what we need to do is work as a community, and I say this with a lot of sincerity. I really don't care what your party registration is. If you want to work together for the common good of the city of Escondido, then I want to work with you.
I know you said you've been getting a lot of emails from people. What do you think are some of the top issues kind of facing Escondido right now?
If I was to kind of list them, there are obviously homelessness was one, economic development, our downtown. People feel we should be doing more music and art. They want the city to engage more in the education process and get more involved in that dialogue. And obviously traffic, which is another big one. And that's, to me, is one of the big challenges that we and every city have, because we recognize that we don't have enough housing for everyone, and that we're going to have to, we collectively, not just Escondido, we're probably going to have to try to solve that. But every new house potentially brings another car on the road. And anybody who's made the commute on the 15 knows the 15 doesn't need another car. And I've already reached out to, and they've reached out to me, to some of the other mayors on the 78 corridor, as well as the supervisors. And there are meetings and plans in place to see what we can do to do some traffic mitigation.
Right, and I know now after this general election that we just had, or this gubernatorial election, there's no longer a Republican majority on the council. It's now a Democratic majority. What do you think that means moving forward?
Well, we've clearly, that comment has been made many times before. And I think it's a false assumption to think because there are 3 of us registered as Democrats and 2 are registered as Republicans that there's going to be this grand divide between us. I know the other 2 council members, and I would say that most of us live somewhere in the central, and I think most of us are seeking the common good. And you will clearly see, probably in one issue or another, some of us will lean a little left, some of us will lean a little right. So I would tell people not to expect too much drama. Okay, I think what you'll see is the other 4 members of the council are very reasonable people. They all have their opinions, so I think those we'll have some differences, and I think those differences are good.
And I know you were just sworn in last week. This is your first full week on the job. Do you have any priorities coming into office right away here? Or?
It's funny you should say that. There's a lot of things that are, if everything's a priority, then nothing's a priority. And that's kind of how I'm feeling right now, because there's just so many things. There's a lot of people who would like to talk with me, and I'm trying to be as open as possible and get everybody on the calendar. I think the biggest priority right now is a tone change. And the tone change is this idea of let's start working together for the common good of the city. And let's leave some of the national and state politics out of our discussion.
Thank you so much, new Mayor of Escondido, Paul McNamara. Thanks for speaking with us.
Thank you for having me.
Coming up in the new year, legal action over the nuclear waste at San Onofre. KPBS reporter Allison St. John says Edison hopes to resume burying the waste in January.
Edison says operations to move highly radioactive spent fuel from cooling ponds to buried silos will not resume till the Nuclear Regulatory Commission inspects revamped procedures. But attorney Mike Aguirre says the NRC's scathing report on a near-miss accident at the now-closed plant is evidence that Edison can no longer be trusted.
We can no longer trust the management of Southern California Edison to load these canisters into the silos, and we cannot trust them to manage the waste. And unfortunately, that means that we're going to have to go back to court. And we're going to ask the court to assist us in stopping any further loading based upon a breach of our settlement agreement.
Aguirre challenged the permit allowing Edison to bury the waste near the beach, and he reached a settlement with Edison and the Coastal Commission last year. Under the settlement, Edison would make every commercially reasonable effort to find an alternative place to store the waste. Instead, Aguirre says canisters holding the waste may have been damaged in the transfer, making future relocation impossible. The NRC says there's no timeline for when Edison can resume transferring the waste, and no inspections have yet been scheduled. Allison St. John, KPBS News.
One of the new laws taking effect next year will apply to pet stores and where they get their animals. Capitol Public Radio's Sammy Kayola says the new law is intended to reduce puppy mills in California.
Next year, pet stores will no longer be allowed to buy from breeders or from puppy mills that raise dogs in poor conditions for profit. Erica Godet-Hughes with the California Animal Welfare Association says many stores already work with shelters and rescues to host adoption events. Under the new law, the stores could buy animals from shelters and resell them, but she doesn't expect this option will be popular. She is worried about a possible loophole.
Fake rescues that form that are actually sourcing animals from puppy mills in a way to get around the law. And if this emerges as a problem, we'll need to seek a change in law.
Pet store industry groups expect shops that don't want to sell rescue animals will take a business hit. A long list of cities already ban pet store sales of dogs and cats. So does Maryland. In Sacramento, I'm Sammy Kayola.
I'm Judy Woodruff. Tonight on the NewsHour, courtroom drama at a sentencing hearing for former National Security Advisor Michael Flynn. Coming up at 7 after Evening Edition on KPBS.
A major surfing competition was postponed in the Bay Area due to dangerous conditions today. Waves as high as 40 feet are slamming into Half Moon Bay south of San Francisco. Some surfers still went into the water despite the warnings. One explained the safety devices that help in these conditions.
These things are really just saving everyone's life. Every single big wave session, everyone has either flotation or a pool vest. And I wear both because some people wear just a pool vest, but say you get knocked out and you don't have the time to pull your vest, I still have my float under, so I'm going to come up regardless.
In Southern California, the Ventura Pier closed today for the first time in several years. Lifeguards are telling people to stay away from the water to avoid getting hit by a sneaker wave. We're also seeing a high surf advisory along the coast in San Diego. Dajia Swad has more in tonight's forecast.
Looking at a pretty quiet pattern here across Southern California, but for points to the north of Southern California and towards Northern California, as well as Washington and Oregon, being slammed with moisture. The good news is that's not really going to be impacting us here tonight. Now, in terms of bad conditions, head out to the sea. We've been talking very elevated waves here, and that's why we have a high surf warning in effect along the coast. Consistent swells have caused this, as well as some gusty winds out of the west-northwest. That's going to begin to ease on out as we head through the rest of tonight and into the overnight hours. Now, as far as San Diego County goes, temperatures-wise here tonight, 45 in Borrego Springs, 40 in Mount Laguna. Clear conditions, and also going to be looking clear out towards Oceanside with a low of 43. Here in San Diego, we're cooling down to 51, mainly clear skies, not too worried about any wet weather, even as we head into our Wednesday. Dry conditions in place, and this is because we have high pressure that's going to be moving into the basin areas. That's going to allow for an offshore flow and allowing for little precipitation to be seen, as well as cloud cover, and also going to be warming up temperatures. So mainly sunny conditions for Oceanside tomorrow with a high of 69, topping off at 77 in Borrego Springs and 62 in Mount Laguna. And as for San Diego, looking at a high of 70. We'll continue to have dry conditions into your Friday as well, but not as warm for the late week as that high pressure begins to move on out. So for tomorrow and Thursday, notice your temperatures a bit warmer in the 70s Thursday at the coast, mostly sunny. Then clouds begin to return as we head into your Friday and Saturday, and that's because we get to onshore flow trying to return. Wednesday, Thursday, once again inland, also going to notice that warm up in the upper 70s Thursday. Plenty of sunshine even thriving through Friday in the inland areas. We'll also be remaining dry into the mountains for your Thursday with a high of 61, and the deserts, not too much to complain about for your Wednesday and Thursday either. Reporting for KPBS News, I'm your meteorologist, Dajia Swad. Back to you.
A holiday giving experience under the sun in San Diego, and people didn't even have to leave their cars. Volunteers handed out food and toys to more than 600 families at SDCCU Stadium. The drive was organized by United Way and the San Diego and Imperial Counties Labor Union.
We have a lot of working families that struggle. I mean, whether they're in a lower wage job, whether they're in a part-time job, but they struggle to make ends meet, and they have to make a choice between a roof over their head or putting a Christmas meal or toys under the tree.
Union workers donated money out of their own pockets and paychecks to help out. United Way says they partnered with more than 2,000 local workers. The military has a new command center that focuses on space. Vice President Mike Pence attended a dedication event today at the Kennedy Space Center in Florida. The new Space Command will organize military operations across all branches to protect U.S. assets in space.
The American people will be glad to know that today there are more than 18,000 military and civilian personnel working in space operations for our national security all across the Department of Defense. And at President Trump's direction, the U.S. Space Command will integrate space capabilities across all branches of the military. It will develop the space doctrine, tactics, techniques, and procedures that will enable our warfighters to defend our nation in this new era.
The Space Command is a separate project from the Space Force, which President Trump is working to establish as a new branch of the military. San Diego International Airport will close its most affordable parking lot next week. The Pacific Highway Economy lot will be used as a parking for airport workers. It will close next Wednesday, December 26th. Parking rates were $13 per day. After the closure, the cheapest rate will be at the airport's long-term parking lot on Harbor Drive at $15 per day with advance online purchase. 50 years ago, Herb Lotz was serving in Vietnam and taking photos of his life in a war zone. In this story produced by New Mexico PBS, he talks about the stories told by his pictures and how he uses them to connect with other veterans.
Initially, when I landed at Cu Chi, we were hit by some rockets and mortars, and I saw the buildings blown up. Very, very quickly you realize things happen in an instant. So I took my job very seriously, and that was to protect my communications unit, to be that good soldier, to be the best little soldier in the world. What it felt like to be in a bunker, I can still feel that today. I had studied photography, so when I was in Vietnam, I kept my camera with me pretty much all the time, and it always had film in it. One of the things that I see when I look at my images is, over that period of a year that I was there, what happens to young men when they come into a situation like war, what they look like in the beginning and what they look like at the end. And you can really see some level of maturity, but I also think you see a loss of innocence. That optimistic young man who might have been in the beginning is not there anymore. When Bob Hope and Ann Margaret came to Cu Chi in 1968, it was a big deal. So there was this field full of soldiers. You know, it had to happen very quickly to see this show and then to disperse, because a rocket or a mortar coming into that number of soldiers would have been devastating. In the photographs that I took of that, you can see in the soldiers' faces some of their exhaustion, some of their observance of what's going on, and you see the weight on their shoulders. I have a wonderful image of one of the fellows, the young fellows who came to work with me, and in the trunk by his bed, the trunk is open and there's a photograph of his girlfriend, you know, who he married as soon as he got home. He was one of the most innocent young men that I knew. He was much younger than I was, and there's a photograph of him sleeping during the day, and you know, you can just see the innocence in this young man, and he survived this. I think that through my photographs I can connect with people. I can make an image that represents something about who we are as people. It's more about what we hold as a body of life as people, I think, is what I photograph. After the service, I could not enter the life I had left. I didn't entirely understand why. When I got back to Illinois, I was virtually homeless. My parents did not know who I was because I had really changed. They had been watching television the whole time I was gone and assumed I would die, you know, that I'd be killed in the war. So they had really grieved my loss. I talk about this with other vets. You know, if we could do this all over again, would we do it differently? And most of them say no. That what we get from the experience is something that really affects our lives. And, you know, it moves us along, and it's extraordinary at some level. In the photography, I don't know that I was trying to tell a story as much as I was trying to protect myself, probably, from dying. You know, at some level, taking the photographs may have allowed me to think that I was preserving myself from death, or from the fear of death. As you get older in life and you can no longer see the future as you can when you're a young person, all you can see really is the past, and then you can see the stories of your life. Not everybody gets that gift. You know, we die at all levels, ages in life, and so this gift of living to the age I am now has allowed me to see a lot of the stories that I've lived. You know, not everybody gets that.
That story is part of the weekly art series Colores by New Mexico PBS. Actress and director Penny Marshall died today in Los Angeles. She was 75. Marshall became a star in the 1970s sitcom Laverne and Shirley, which was a spin-off of Happy Days. In later years, she directed movies such as A League of Their Own and Big, which was the first film directed by a woman to earn $100 million at the box office. Marshall's family says she passed away from complications of diabetes. Now, here's a look at what we're working on for tomorrow in the KPBS newsroom. On Morning Edition, home for the holidays, Julia Roberts chats about the unexpected reunion and her new movie. And Midday Edition, meet the man in charge of connecting health and social services to people in need. We'll chat with Omar Passons tomorrow on KPBS Radio. You can find tonight's stories on our website, kpbs.org/evening edition. Thanks for joining us. Have a great night.